My name is Maya Chen, and I'm 23 years old. What happened on the steps of our university's graduation hall last May is something that completely changed my understanding of toxic relationships, hidden potential, and the moment when someone who's been undermining your confidence gets proven spectacularly wrong in front of everyone who matters. Picture this: my boyfriend Derek standing beside me after the ceremony, choosing my proudest moment to tear down my self-worth by announcing to my family that I'd never make it alone in the real world, only to watch his face crumble as I smiled and introduced the Fortune 500 executive standing 3 feet away, the man who had just offered me a position that would pay more than Derek would earn in his first 3 years combined. You see, that moment when Derek realized his attempt to humiliate me had backfired wasn't just embarrassing, it was the instant our entire relationship dynamic shifted, because the woman he'd been convincing was helpless and dependent had just revealed connections and opportunities he never knew existed. The same boyfriend who had spent 2 years making me doubt my abilities was now watching me decline his generous offer to support me while I figured out my career, because I already had my career figured out at a level that made his condescension look pathetic. Before we dive into this incredible story of graduation day vindication, I need to know, where in the world are you watching this unfold right now? Drop your country and local time in the comments. Are you starting your morning with some relationship karma, or winding down your evening with a story about toxic partners getting what they deserve? And if you've ever had someone in your life try to convince you that you couldn't succeed without them, give this video a thumbs up. You're about to see why people who underestimate you often reveal more about their own insecurities than your actual capabilities. Quick question before we jump in: have you ever been in a relationship where your partner seemed more invested in keeping you small than helping you grow? Because this story is going to explore how some people use emotional manipulation to maintain control, and how the most satisfying response is sometimes just succeeding so obviously that their tactics become irrelevant. Let me take you back 2 years to the beginning of my relationship with Derek Martinez, when I was a junior in college studying computer science and he was a senior in business who seemed confident, ambitious, and interested in building a future together. Derek had all the surface qualities that made him attractive to someone like me who had always been more focused on academics than dating. He was socially confident where I was reserved, outgoing where I was analytical, and seemed to have his post-graduation career path clearly mapped out with internships and networking connections I envied. But what I initially interpreted as confidence and ambition gradually revealed itself as something much more problematic: Derek's need to be the successful one in our relationship, which meant keeping me in a supporting role rather than encouraging me to pursue my own achievements. The pattern started subtly during my junior year, when I was considering applying for competitive summer internships at technology companies. I had strong grades, relevant project experience, and professors who were willing to provide recommendations, but Derek consistently found reasons why these opportunities weren't right for me. "Maya, those tech internships are incredibly competitive," he'd say when I mentioned application deadlines. "You don't want to set yourself up for disappointment by aiming too high right away." "But Professor Wang thinks I have a good chance at getting interviews." Professor Wang probably encourages all his students to apply to prestigious companies. "That doesn't mean you're actually competitive for those positions." "My grades are good, and I've been working on projects that directly relate to what these companies do." Good grades in college don't necessarily translate to success in corporate environments. These companies want people with natural leadership abilities and business instincts, not just technical knowledge. The subtext was always the same: I was technically competent but lacked the social and professional skills necessary for real success. Derek positioned himself as someone who understood the real world in ways I didn't, and who could guide me toward more realistic career expectations. This dynamic continued throughout our relationship, with Derek subtly undermining my confidence while positioning himself as my connection to practical success. When I mentioned wanting to attend networking events, he'd explain why I wouldn't fit in with those crowds. When I talked about innovative project ideas, he'd point out why they weren't commercially viable. When professors praised my work, he'd suggest they were just being encouraging rather than genuinely impressed. The most damaging part wasn't the specific criticisms, it was the consistent message that my judgment about my own capabilities couldn't be trusted, and that Derek's assessment of my potential was more accurate than my own experience of my achievements. I'm not trying to discourage you, he'd say whenever I pushed back against his negativity. I'm trying to help you avoid disappointment by being realistic about your strengths and limitations. But you never seem to think I'm capable of achieving anything significant. That's not true. I think you're very talented at certain things. I just want you to focus on opportunities where you can actually succeed rather than chasing goals that might be beyond your reach. By my senior year, Derek's influence had successfully convinced me that my professor's encouragement was politeness rather than genuine recognition of potential, that my academic achievements were the result of grade inflation rather than actual competence, and that my career ambitions were unrealistic fantasies that would lead to disappointment and failure. But what Derek didn't know, what I had carefully kept from him because I'd learned that sharing good news just triggered more attempts to diminish it, was that one of my professors had been quietly connecting me with industry contacts who were genuinely impressed by my technical abilities and innovative thinking. Professor Sarah Liu had been mentoring me for over a year, not just academically but professionally, introducing me to alumni working in major technology companies and helping me understand how to present my skills and experience in ways that would resonate with corporate recruiters. Maya, you have exactly the kind of analytical thinking and creative problem-solving skills that top tech companies value most, she'd told me during one of our regular mentoring sessions. Derek's assessment of your potential is not just wrong, it's the opposite of what industry professionals see when they review your work. But he says that academic success doesn't translate to corporate environments. Maya, I've been placing students in technology careers for 15 years. The students who succeed at the highest levels are exactly like you, technically excellent, innovative thinkers who can solve complex problems creatively. Derek's advice isn't protecting you from disappointment, it's protecting his ego from the reality that your potential far exceeds his own. Those conversations with Professor Liu had been my lifeline during 2 years of Derek's subtle undermining, reminding me that his assessment of my capabilities might say more about his need to feel superior than about my actual potential for success. But I had kept those conversations, and the opportunities they were generating, completely separate from my relationship with Derek, partly because I'd learned that sharing positive feedback just triggered more creative ways for him to diminish it. What Derek also didn't know was that Professor Liu had arranged for me to interview with several major technology companies during my senior year, including one interview that had led to an offer that would change everything about my post-graduation plans. Time to pause here because what happened next is absolutely incredible, and I want to make sure you're ready for the most satisfying graduation day reveal ever captured. If you're loving this story about a toxic boyfriend getting his comeuppance, smash that subscribe button right now and hit the notification bell. We post stories like this every week about toxic relationships and the moment when manipulative partners realize they've completely misjudged their victim's actual capabilities. And while you're here, tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are, and have you ever had someone try to convince you that you weren't capable of achieving your goals? I'm genuinely curious how many of you have experienced this kind of undermining disguised as being realistic. The job offer came 3 weeks before graduation, during what should have been the most stressful period of my senior year as I was finishing final projects and preparing for comprehensive exams. Instead, it became the most confidence-boosting period of my college experience. The call came from Marcus Thompson, Senior Vice President of Technology at Innovate Solutions, one of the most respected software development companies in our region. Professor Liu had arranged the initial introduction 6 months earlier, but the interview process had taken several months as the company evaluated candidates for what they described as a highly selective development program for exceptional recent graduates. Maya, this is Marcus Thompson from Innovate Solutions. I'm calling with some news about your application for our advanced developer program. Thank you for calling, Mr. Thompson. I've been looking forward to hearing from you. Maya, I want you to know that we were exceptionally impressed by your technical interview, your project portfolio, and particularly your innovative approach to the algorithmic challenges we presented. We'd like to offer you a position in our advanced developer program with a starting salary of $95,000, full benefits, and a clear advancement track that could lead to senior developer roles within 18 months. $95,000. More money than I'd ever imagined earning immediately after graduation, in a program designed for what they called exceptional recent graduates with leadership potential. Mr. Thompson, I'm honored by this offer. Can you tell me more about the program structure and expectations? Certainly. The Advanced Developer Program places high-potential new graduates directly into challenging projects with senior development teams. You'll be working on cutting-edge software solutions for Fortune 500 clients, with mentorship from our most experienced developers and opportunities to lead projects as you demonstrate readiness for increased responsibilities. That sounds incredible. Maya, I want to emphasize that this offer reflects our genuine excitement about your potential. Your professors spoke very highly of your abilities, but your interview performance and project work exceeded even those recommendations. We see you as someone who could become a key contributor to our company's most important initiatives. The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Marcus explaining the company culture, growth opportunities, and why they viewed me as someone with exceptional potential for leadership in technology development. But what made the offer even more meaningful was the timing. Derek had spent the past month ramping up his efforts to convince me that I should move to his city after graduation, take a practical entry-level position that wouldn't challenge me too much, and focus on supporting his career advancement while I figured out what I wanted to do professionally. Maya, you don't need to rush into some high-pressure career situation right after college, he'd been saying. Why don't you move to Denver with me, find a nice administrative job that won't stress you out, and give yourself time to decide what you really want to do with your life? But I already know what I want to do. I want to work in software development. You think you know what you want to do, but you've never actually worked in a corporate environment. You might discover that it's not as appealing as you imagine. Derek, I've been studying computer science for 4 years. I've done internships, worked on real projects, gotten feedback from industry professionals. Academic projects aren't the same as commercial software development. You might find that the pressure and expectations are much more demanding than what you're used to. Derek's message was consistent. I wasn't ready for challenging professional opportunities. I needed time to develop realistic expectations about my capabilities, and the smart choice was to focus on supporting his career while I slowly built confidence through less demanding work. But now I had an offer from a respected company that saw me as someone with exceptional potential, ready for immediate placement in challenging projects with advancement opportunities based on demonstrated performance rather than gradual confidence building. I accepted the offer immediately, but I didn't tell Derek about it. Instead, I decided to wait for the perfect moment to reveal that his assessment of my potential had been catastrophically wrong, and graduation day provided exactly that opportunity. The ceremony was beautiful, held in our university's historic main hall with families gathered to celebrate 4 years of academic achievement. Derek attended with my parents, playing the role of supportive boyfriend while privately preparing what I now realize was his final attempt to undermine my confidence at the moment when I should have felt most proud of my accomplishments. As we walked out of the ceremony hall, diploma in hand and family members taking photos, Derek positioned himself for what he clearly intended to be an important conversation about our future together. Maya, now that college is over, we need to talk seriously about your next steps, he said, loud enough for my parents and nearby families to hear. What do you mean? I mean it's time to be realistic about your career prospects and make practical decisions about your future. My parents looked confused by Derek's timing, choosing my graduation moment to discuss my supposed career limitations, but I could see he'd planned this conversation to happen when I was surrounded by family, making it harder for me to push back against his advice. Maya, you're a bright girl, but the real world is very different from college. You're going to need support and guidance as you figure out what you're actually capable of achieving professionally. Derek, this isn't really the time, it's exactly the time. Maya, you'll never make it alone in a competitive industry like technology. You need someone who understands business and can help you navigate professional environments you're not prepared for. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. My parents looked uncomfortable with Derek's public assessment of my capabilities, but I could see he was counting on family pressure to make me accept his generous offer to manage my career. Transition. Fortunately, Derek continued, I'm prepared to support you while you adjust your expectations and find work that matches your actual skill level. You can move to Denver with me, I'll cover most of our expenses, and you can take your time finding an administrative position that won't overwhelm you. Administrative position. In front of my parents and other graduating families, Derek was suggesting that my computer science degree qualified me for administrative work rather than actual technology development. That's when I smiled and decided it was time for Derek to meet someone whose opinion of my potential differed significantly from his assessment. Derek, that's very generous of you to offer, but I don't think that will be necessary, I said, looking around until I spotted the person I was looking for. Actually, I'd like you to meet someone. Marcus Thompson was standing about 20 feet away, having attended the ceremony because Innovate Solutions made a practice of personally congratulating students who'd accepted positions in their advanced developer program. Professor Liu had mentioned he might attend, and I'd spotted him during the ceremony. Mr. Thompson, I called, waving him over. I'd like you to meet my family. Marcus approached with the confident friendliness that came from being a successful executive who genuinely enjoyed celebrating other people's achievements. Maya, congratulations again on your graduation, he said warmly. Your family must be very proud. Thank you. Mom, Dad, Derek, I'd like you to meet Marcus Thompson, Senior Vice President of Technology at Innovate Solutions. Derek's expression shifted immediately as he tried to understand why I was introducing him to a corporate executive. Mr. Thompson, Derek was just explaining his theory that I'll never make it alone in the technology industry, I said with perfect pleasantness. I thought you might find that perspective interesting, given that your company just offered me a position in your advanced developer program. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Derek's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, shock, and something that looked like panic as he processed what I'd just revealed. Maya accepted a fantastic position with us, Marcus told my parents enthusiastically. She'll be joining our advanced developer program, which is reserved for recent graduates we identify as having exceptional potential for leadership in technology development. Leadership potential? Dad asked, looking at Derek and then back at me. Maya's technical abilities and innovative thinking impressed everyone who interviewed her, Marcus continued. We're excited to have someone with her capabilities joining our development teams. What kind of salary does a position like that offer? Mom asked, still processing that I had somehow secured a job with a senior executive without mentioning it to anyone. The advanced developer program starts at $95,000 annually, with clear advancement opportunities based on performance. Maya has the potential to reach senior developer roles very quickly if her work continues to demonstrate the excellence we saw during her interview process. $95,000. Derek's face had gone completely pale as he processed that the girlfriend he'd been trying to convince was unemployable had actually secured a position paying more than he would earn in his first job out of business school. Maya, Derek said weakly, when did you interview for this position? Over the past 6 months. Professor Liu arranged the introduction, and I've been working through their selection process while finishing my degree. But you never mentioned, why didn't you tell me you were interviewing with major companies? The answer to that question was obvious to everyone listening, because Derek had spent 2 years convincing me that such opportunities were beyond my capabilities, making it easier to pursue them without his interference than to fight his negativity throughout the process. I didn't mention it because I wanted to focus on the interviews and applications without external opinions about my chances of success. Marcus, sensing the interpersonal tension but not understanding its source, began wrapping up the conversation. Maya, we're looking forward to having you join our team next month. You should be very proud of your achievements. After Marcus walked away, Derek stood there processing that his girlfriend had not only secured a prestigious job without his knowledge, but had done so at a level that proved everything he'd been telling her about her limitations was wrong. Maya, I can't believe you didn't tell me about this opportunity. Derek, you spent 2 years explaining why I wasn't qualified for competitive positions at major companies. Why would I discuss opportunities you'd already convinced me I shouldn't pursue? I was trying to help you be realistic, You were trying to keep me dependent on your assessment of my potential instead of discovering what industry professionals actually thought of my capabilities. The conversation continued for several more minutes, but the fundamental dynamic had shifted completely. Derek could no longer position himself as my guide to professional success when I'd already achieved more than he had access to. My parents, meanwhile, were processing that their daughter had not only secured an impressive position but had done so while her boyfriend was actively discouraging her from pursuing such opportunities. "Maya, we're so proud of you," Mom said. "We had no idea you were working towards something this significant." I wanted to focus on the process rather than managing other people's expectations about the outcome. The graduation celebration continued, but Derek's confident role as my career advisor had evaporated completely. Instead of being the knowledgeable boyfriend who would guide me through post-graduation challenges, he was now the person whose assessment of my potential had been proven spectacularly wrong in front of everyone who mattered. But hold on, I need to pause here because Derek's reaction over the next few hours was absolutely unbelievable, and I want to make sure you don't miss how someone's behavior changes when their control tactics suddenly become powerless. If you're enjoying this story about toxic relationship dynamics getting completely destroyed by actual success, make sure you're subscribed because we have so many more stories about people who tried to control others through manipulation and lived to regret it. Real quick, what country are you watching from, and have you ever had someone try to convince you that your dreams were unrealistic while secretly hoping you'd stay small? Let me know in the comments because the psychology behind this behavior is fascinating and way more common than people realize. Derek's reaction to my job offer revelation went through several distinct phases over the remainder of graduation day, each one more revealing about his actual motivations for our relationship than anything he'd ever directly admitted. Phase 1 was damage control, trying to reframe his previous discouragement as protective concern rather than manipulation. "Maya, I'm happy for you, but I hope you understand that I was only trying to protect you from disappointment," he said during our family dinner after the ceremony. "I didn't want you to get your hopes up for positions that might not work out." But the position did work out. Yes, and I'm glad it did. But you have to admit that it was risky to pursue something so competitive without having backup plans. Derek, having backup plans doesn't require convincing someone they're not qualified for their primary goals. I never said you weren't qualified, you said I'd never make it alone in a competitive industry. You said I lacked the business instincts and leadership abilities that companies actually value. You said my academic achievements wouldn't translate to corporate success. I was trying to help you prepare for different scenarios. You were trying to convince me that I needed you to navigate professional environments I wasn't capable of handling myself. Phase 2 was attempting to minimize the significance of my achievement. "Maya, this is a great opportunity, but you should understand that entry-level positions, even well-paid ones, are just the beginning of building a real career," Derek said later that evening when we were alone. "It's not exactly entry-level, it's a program for high-potential graduates." "Right, but everyone in those programs starts at the same level. What really matters is advancement opportunities and whether you can handle the pressure of increasing responsibilities." Marcus mentioned clear advancement tracks based on performance. Companies always say that during recruitment. The reality is usually different once you start working there. Even faced with evidence that contradicted everything he'd been telling me about my potential, Derek couldn't acknowledge that his assessment had been wrong. Instead, he was already working to undermine my confidence about succeeding in the role I'd been offered. Phase 3 was the most revealing, attempting to re-establish his role as my guide and protector, but now in relation to challenges I'd face in my new position. "Maya, I'm concerned about you moving to a new city and starting a demanding job without sufficient support," he said the next morning. "Maybe I should reconsider the Denver opportunity and look for work in your area so I can be available to help you adjust to corporate life." "Derek, yesterday you said I'd never make it alone in the technology industry. Today you want to follow me to my new job to provide support. What changed?" "Nothing changed. I've always wanted to support your success." "By convincing me I wasn't capable of success?" "By helping you prepare for the realities of professional environments." "But I don't need help preparing, I already navigated the preparation successfully and secured the position. The conversation revealed everything about Derek's actual motivations. When he thought I was dependent on his guidance, he'd been content to keep me in a supporting role. But now that I'd demonstrated independence and capability beyond his own achievements, he was desperate to re-establish some form of control or relevance in my success. Phase 4 was the relationship ultimatum disguised as romantic concern. "Maya, I need to be honest about something," Derek said during our final conversation before I moved to start my new position. "I'm worried that this job is going to change you in ways that might not be good for our relationship." "What do you mean?" "I mean that high-pressure corporate environments can make people competitive and ambitious in ways that damage their personal relationships. I'm concerned that you might lose the qualities I fell in love with." "The qualities you fell in love with?" "Your kindness, your humility, your focus on relationships rather than just career achievement." "Derek, you're describing someone who doesn't threaten your sense of superiority. What you're really saying is that you prefer me insecure and dependent rather than confident and successful." "That's not fair, it's completely fair. You spent 2 years undermining my confidence and convincing me I needed your guidance to navigate challenges I wasn't capable of handling alone. Now that I've proven you wrong, you're worried that I won't be controllable anymore. Maya, if you take this job, I think it's going to destroy our relationship." "Derek, our relationship was already destroyed by 2 years of you trying to keep me small so you could feel important." The breakup was inevitable once Derek realized that I was no longer the insecure girlfriend who doubted her own capabilities and relied on his assessment of her potential. Without that dynamic, he had no interest in a relationship with someone whose success exceeded his own. But the most satisfying part wasn't ending a toxic relationship, it was starting my new position with complete confidence in my abilities, free from the subtle undermining that had been limiting my professional growth for 2 years. The Advanced Developer program at Innovate Solutions was everything Marcus had described and more. Within 6 months, I was leading client projects that generated significant revenue for the company. Within 18 months, I'd been promoted to senior developer with a salary increase to $120,000. Within 2 years, I was managing development teams and being recruited by other companies for leadership positions. But the real validation came when Derek contacted me 18 months after graduation, ostensibly to congratulate me on professional achievements he'd seen mentioned on LinkedIn. "Maya, I saw that you were promoted to senior developer. That's impressive advancement for someone so early in their career." "Thank you. The work has been challenging and rewarding. I wanted to apologize for not being more supportive of your ambitions when we were together. I realize now that I underestimated your potential." "Derek, you didn't just underestimate my potential, you actively worked to convince me that pursuing challenging opportunities would lead to failure and disappointment. I was trying to protect you, you were trying to control me by keeping me insecure about my own capabilities. There's a difference between protection and manipulation. Maya, I've been thinking about our relationship a lot, and I wonder if we could try again now that we're both more established in our careers." The suggestion was almost funny. Derek had spent 2 years convincing me I wasn't capable of professional success, ended our relationship when that success became undeniable, and now wanted to reconnect once I'd proven that everything he'd said about my limitations was wrong. "Derek, our relationship was based on you maintaining superiority by keeping me dependent and insecure. Now that I'm successful and confident, what exactly would our dynamic be?" "It would be different. I respect what you've achieved, you respect what I've achieved because other people validate it now. But you had the opportunity to support my growth when I was still building confidence, and instead you chose to undermine it. People change, Maya. I've learned from my mistakes." "I'm sure you have. But I've also learned from mine, and one of those mistakes was accepting a relationship with someone who needed me to stay small so they could feel big." The conversation ended there, but it provided perfect closure to a relationship that had been more about control than connection. 3 years after graduation, I'm now a development team lead at Innovate Solutions, managing projects worth millions of dollars, mentoring junior developers, and being recruited by companies that value exactly the kind of technical expertise and leadership potential that Derek had convinced me I didn't possess. But more importantly, I'm in a relationship with someone who celebrates my achievements, encourages my ambitions, and views my success as something that enhances rather than threatens our partnership. The graduation day revelation wasn't just about proving Derek wrong, it was about proving to myself that his assessment of my potential had been based on his need to feel superior rather than any accurate evaluation of my actual capabilities. Sometimes the most toxic people in our lives are the ones who claim to love us while systematically undermining our confidence in our own abilities. And sometimes the most powerful response to that manipulation isn't arguing about their treatment, it's succeeding so obviously that their tactics become irrelevant. Derek had spent 2 years trying to convince me I'd never make it alone, but graduation day proved that I'd been making it alone all along, I just hadn't realized it yet. Before we wrap up this incredible story of toxic relationship karma, I'm dying to know, what time zone are you in right now, and have you ever had someone try to keep you small by disguising their control as concern for your well-being? The psychology behind this behavior is absolutely fascinating, and I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. And if this story reminded you that people who truly love you want to see you succeed rather than keeping you dependent on their approval, please share it with someone who might need that reminder. You never know who's currently dealing with their own Derek and could use some encouragement that their potential isn't limited by someone else's need to feel important. What manipulation disguised as love have you experienced from partners who claim to be protecting you from disappointment? What success have you achieved after someone told you it was beyond your capabilities? Thank you for watching this journey with me, whether you're having your morning coffee in Toronto or winding down for bed in Melbourne. I'm grateful you took the time to experience this graduation day vindication. If you've ever been told you'd never make it alone by someone who was actually just scared of what you'd accomplish without their interference, you're definitely not alone. I hope this story reminded you that people who need to keep you insecure probably have more limitations than you do. Make sure to drop "never alone" in the comments if you believe that people who try to control others through manufactured insecurity usually reveal more about their own fears than their target's actual capabilities. And while you're commenting, tell me what country you're watching from. I absolutely love seeing our global community and how universal these relationship dynamics unfortunately are. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell because we share stories like this every week about toxic relationships, professional vindication, and those perfect moments when manipulative people realize they've completely misjudged their target's actual potential. One final question: do you think Derek genuinely believed I wasn't capable of success, or do you think he knew I had potential and was trying to suppress it? I'm genuinely curious about your psychological insights, so let me know in the comments what you think was really motivating his behavior. Remember, people who truly want the best for you will encourage your growth rather than trying to convince you that growth is impossible. When someone needs you to stay small for their comfort, they're telling you more about their own insecurities than your actual limitations.